echoed through the ancient stone walls of the abandoned textile mill, nestled ominously on the Panini Way in West Yorkshire. The decaying structure loomed against the darkening sky, its broken windows resembling the hollow eyes of a skull. Watching the approach of the ghost hunters with almost malevolent anticipation, Ethan and Claire had been hunting ghosts for years, driven by a mixture of curiosity and a desire to prove the existence of the supernatural. Tonight, they sought out the desolate ruins of Hawthorne Mill, a place whispered about in local lore as cursed and forsaken. Built in the early 19th century, the mill had been the scene of numerous tragic accidents and mysterious disappearances, leading to its closure and abandonment. As they approached the entrance, Ethan's flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced across the cracked stone. Claire shivered, pulling her jacket tighter against the biting cold. The air was thick with the scent of damp and decay, mingled with something else, something old and bitter, like the memory of suffering long past. "Ready?" Ethan asked, his voice steady but his eyes betraying a flicker of unease. "Let's do this," Claire replied, her resolve firm despite the knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. They stepped inside, the heavy wooden doors creaking in protest. The interior was a labyrinth of crumbling walls and rusted machinery, remnants of a bygone era. The beams of their flashlights sliced through the darkness, revealing glimpses of faded posters, broken looms, and heaps of dust-covered textiles. "This place is a gold mine for paranormal activity," Ethan whispered, setting up their equipment. They had EMF meters, digital recorders, and infrared cameras, all essential tools for documenting ghostly encounters. As they ventured deeper into the mill, a sense of foreboding grew stronger. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional scurrying of rats and the distant drip of water. The further they went, the colder it became, until their breath hung in the air like ghostly apparitions. Suddenly, Claire stopped, her EMF meter spiking wildly. "Ethan, look at this." Ethan hurried over, his eyes widening at the erratic readings. "There's definitely something here. Let's try an EVP session." They switched on the digital recorder and Claire began to speak, her voice echoing through the empty hall. "Is there anyone here with us? We don't mean you any harm. Can you tell us your name?" For a moment, there was only silence. Then a faint whisper crackled through the recorder. "Leave." Claire and Ethan exchanged nervous glances. "We're here to understand what happened to you," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the chill creeping down his spine. "Can you tell us why you're still here?" The response was immediate and chilling. Revenge. Ethan's flashlight flickered again, and he felt a sudden drop in temperature. "We should move," he said, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. They continued deeper into the mill, each step echoing ominously. As they reached the heart of the building, they came across an old weaver's room. The loom still set up as if waiting for workers who would never return. The air here was suffused with a palpable sense of dread. "Did you hear that?" Claire asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, straining to listen. There was again a faint rhythmic thudding, like the distant pounding of a loom. They followed the sound, their flashlights revealing a narrow staircase leading down into the basement. The air grew colder still, and the walls seemed to close in around them as they descended. At the bottom, they found a heavy wooden door slightly ajar. With a shared glance of trepidation, they pushed it open and stepped inside. The basement was vast and pitch dark, their flashlights barely piercing the gloom. The air was thick with dust, making it hard to breathe. "Do you smell that?" Claire asked, wrinkling her nose. It was a rancid odor, like rotting flesh. Ethan nodded, feeling the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "Let's set up the infrared camera here." As they worked, the rhythmic thudding grew louder, echoing through the dark space. It was then they saw a shadowy figure at the far end of the room, moving in and out of their flashlight beams. Figure seemed to be working alone, its movements mechanical and unending. "Hello," Claire called out, her voice trembling. The figure stopped, slowly turning towards them. The flashlight beam revealed a gaunt, spectral face twisted in an expression of eternal torment. "Why are you here?" Ethan asked, his voice barely steady. The figure stared at them with hollow eyes, then spoke in a voice that echoed with centuries of pain. "We were betrayed, forced to work until we died. Now we seek vengeance." Suddenly, the basement door slammed shut, and the room plunged into darkness. Their flashlights flickered and died, leaving them in an impenetrable blackness. The air grew colder and the sound of the loom grew louder, now accompanied by whispers and moans. "Stay close," Ethan whispered, reaching for Claire, but his hand grasped only empty air. "Claire," he called out, panic rising in his chest. There was no reply. He spun around, desperately trying to see through the darkness. "Claire!" A chilling laugh echoed through the room, and Ethan felt a cold hand brush against his neck. He turned, but there was nothing there. But whispers grew louder, merging into a cacophony of voices, all crying out in pain and anger. "Show yourself," Ethan shouted, fear giving way to anger. "What do you want from us?" A voice whispered directly into his ear, freezing his blood. "Your souls." Suddenly, a light flared in the darkness. It was Claire, her flashlight somehow back on. She was standing in the middle of the room, eyes wide with terror, surrounded by shadowy figures. "Ethan, help me," she cried, but her voice was distant, as if coming from a great distance. Ethan tried to move, but it felt like his feet were glued to the floor. The shadows closed in around Claire, their forms becoming more solid, more menacing. "Leave us," Ethan shouted, tears streaming down his face. "Let her go." Figures paused, turning their hollow eyes towards him. "We were forsaken," they whispered in unison. "Now you will share our fate." With a sudden rush of air, the shadows converged on Claire, and she vanished, her scream echoing through the room. The lights flickered back on, and Ethan found himself alone in the basement. The air still and silent. Desperate and broken, he stumbled up the stairs and out of the mill. Cold night air, a sharp contrast to the suffocating darkness inside. He fell to his knees, sobbing, the weight of what he had witnessed crushing his spirit. Hawthorne Mill stood silent and brooding behind him, its dark windows watching, waiting for the next souls to wander into its grasp. The legend of the Weaver's wrath would continue, as those who had been betrayed in life sought vengeance in death, their suffering immortalized in the cold stone, resting machinery of the abandoned mill on the Panini Way.